before we go to the introduction, I would briefly like to go through the agenda. We start with an introduction on the aligned project and the rationale behind the project. Then our coordinator, Mr. Massimo Pizzol of Aalborg University, will give an overview of the aligned methodologies that we are developing and also where you can find information on this. After questions and feedback, then we go to the main body of the presentation. Mr. Marcos Watanabe of NTNU in Norway will give a presentation on the modeling of prospective background systems. These are systems which are related to the changing background data. There's a whole body of science on that which is developing, and we in Aligned, of course, try to do our part in that. After that, we go to the conclusions and the wrap-up. It could be that we are finished a little bit earlier. Mostly, that is not seen as a problem. Good. This was the housekeeping. Then I would say we go to the first part of the agenda, which is my presentation again. I'm sorry, you are stuck a little bit with me in the beginning. After that, I'm gone. As I said, I'm Patrick Reumerman from BDG in the Netherlands. And the rationale behind our project, the Aligned project, is very well described by the European Union, who was part of, who made this call and actually made the start of the project. That is that, of course, we want to move all away from fossil resources. We want to go to bio-based resources together. And these bio-based resources, the bio-based processes, they hold a promise of various good things, reversing climate change, but also protecting air, water, soil, reducing emissions. So that means it's not automatic that they are better in all ways, but they hold a promise. And of course, this promise we would like to fulfill. So the EU said, well, it's good if you try to improve the environmental performance of the 5 industrial bio-based sectors, which are substantial in terms of material and impact, namely construction, woodworking, textiles, pulp and paper, and biochemicals. There was a call. We submitted a proposal, and we were one of the 2 projects which were selected. Then there is also a rationale from our side. Why did we want to do this proposal? And that's actually because of a project which we did earlier, also for the European Union. And there we looked at biorefineries. And one of the tasks in that was, what are the barriers towards more biorefineries, more bio-based products from these biorefineries? We did we did interviews with stakeholders, and we asked what is a barrier, and the sustainability evidence proving sustainability was seen by many as a barrier, and not only on one part, but several issues were there. The sustainability, to prove it via an LCA, is costly. You need an LCA and life cycle assessment on a product level for each product. It's open to interpretation. There is no level playing field with the fossil competition. For fossil competition, often no LCA is needed. There are lots of labels linked to sustainability claims, but they are not always effective. There are many different methods for proving sustainability or showing that it is there. They're sometimes sector specific, and that means that the terminology is confusing. So the public and sometimes even the professionals don't understand that all. So what we try to do, besides the direct goal of improving the environmental sustainability of these 5 sectors, We also want to improve the environmental sustainability methodologies. So that's here in this long overall goal. The key points which you want, which we can make out of this, which we can put out of this, is that we want to improve modeling practices. We want to fill data gaps and develop new methods so that we, in the end, we hope to reach a harmonized, you could say an aligned, assessment framework for bio-based products. That we also see that in the special objective, improve, harmonize, and align LCA methodologies. We want to demonstrate that in case studies. We have 5 case studies, 1 for each sector. And then the third thing, and there this presentation of this workshop is of course important. We want to involve and inform relevant stakeholders so that the methodology uptake is good and that we can take in your feedback to improve our work. This is again the same thing, but only then in a graphical sense. And the methodologies, we harmonize them. We try to find the scientific consensus. We develop tools and models in our framework. We test them in 5 case studies and analyze the results and improve the methodological framework. And together with the stakeholders, we have a communication and feedback loop. Who is we? Who is doing that? We are a partnership of several universities, several case study companies, and a few research SMEs. Of the universities, we have, of course, the Denmark Aalborg University, the University of Antwerpen, INSA, and the Norwegian NTNU, where Marcos is located. 5 case study companies, each for a sector, and BTG as one of the research SMEs is also included. And we have 1 sector organization in the textile sector. You can see it in the logo, Centexpel. Then, about this workshop, we try to implement in our work the open science approach. And that means that you have your data relatively as open as possible. It should be findable. It should be accessible. You may know the FAIR acronym. Findable, accessible, iterable, and reusable. And the open methodology, that's an interesting one. That means, among other things, that we try to have active stakeholder engagement during our development. So this is the things which we try to do also in this workshop. During our work, we want to show what we are doing, and we want to gather feedback on how we do it and adjust if needed. We will do this in 3 methodology workshops. One has been already held about half a year ago. We are now at the 2nd workshop, and in the latter part of 2024, we will have the 3rd one. And yeah, we want to have the feedback. We have 2 topics today. I mentioned already the general overview. Massimo will start right after me. And then Marcos Watanabe will work on the prospective background systems. If you want to know, okay, what did we do in the last methodology workshop, the recording is available. Good. That was the general introduction. I would like to wish you a very interesting workshop. I encourage you to be interactive with us within the limits of what is possible. And thank you very much. And on that note, I would like to end my presentation and give the word to Massimo.
Yeah, thank you, Patrick, for the introduction. And I'm going to share screen in a second. So could you please confirm that you see my presentation in full screen mode?
We see it now in full screen mode. Yes.
Okay, great. A little note before I start. So I don't see the chat while I speak, so I won't be answering questions there, but the others will do. So you're still welcome to write, but it won't be me the one answering during the presentation, but I will answer after the presentation. So welcome all, and thank you for being here. It's really nice to see so many people attending. And I'm Massimo Pizzol, and I'm a professor at the Department of Sustainability and Planning at Aalborg University, and I'm coordinating with other colleagues this project. What I will present today is an overview of one of the, let's say, the main deliverable of the project so far, which is the deliverable 1.2 description of scientific methods. So as you have understood from the presentation of Patrick, in the first year and a half of the project, we've been focusing on trying to put together this scientific framework, so a series of tools and methods and approaches that can be used together for the assessment of bio-based products. And this we have now documented in this deliverable, and that's what I will present today. So about this deliverable, I won't go in the details of everything, but I'll try to provide an overview, and then all this material is open access and you're welcome to check it more in detail. So first of all, the idea, the work that we have been doing is a sort of work of bridging. So we know that there is a lot of theories and methods and tools available in the scientific literature. So there's a lot of science out there, but not all of this is used in practice in real world situations, because there is a sort of gap between, using the tools that the scientists provide and, between the tools that are provided by scientists and the actual use. And the work we have done is to try to find the best, what we think are the best methods to solve a series of problems, and try to make them more useful, to improve them, and more available and more applicable by practitioners. So we have been, that's where the deliverable is, in the intersection between the science and the practice. So our deliverable 1.2 proposes a scientific framework, which is for the LCA of bio-based products in the project, first of all, and then beyond. This framework includes a series of approaches, of methods and tools that have been reviewed and further developed or created within Work Package 1. This is all openly available and will be applied and tested in the next year and a half in the case studies of a project. And the idea is that you could use these tools to improve the environmental performance of bio-based activities, industrial activities, and in particular, we will focus on 5 sectors as already introduced by Patrick. So what does this deliverable cover? We try to cover all the 4 phases of a LCA according to the ISO standards. So we have these elements regarding the lifecycle inventory. We have a method for generating dynamic background system for prospective LCA of bio-based products and beyond. This is what Marcus will go more in detail today. This is what we have chosen also to highlight today. We couldn't do everything, but we chose to focus on this part. Then we have regarding the goal and scope and the inventory as well. We have a method for identification of market constraints, because biomass is not an infinite resource, and there is a lot of competition for that across many industries and sectors. And then we have a method for the time and space dependent carbon accounting. This means the uptake and release of carbon for particularly lignocellulosic feedstocks to return mass balanced carbon inventories, life cycle inventories that you can use when you have a bio-based product that requires a feedstock, a bio-based feedstock. Then we have, in terms of life cycle impact assessment, we have the methods and the characterization factors for a dynamic, again, assessment of climate change and for the assessment of biodiversity impacts. Dynamic means that you have time-specific or time-dependent, let's say, characterization factors, so that you can properly account for the uptake and release at different times of carbon, which might happen if you have specific types of bio-based products, for example, the long-lived ones. Then regarding interpretation, we have methods for performing uncertainty and sensitivity analysis. And then we have also about interpretation, a method for expanding a bit the scope. This is a more experimental part, expanding the scope of analysis to socioeconomic impacts. What actually is included in this deliverable? The deliverable is not just a PDF file, let's say, but is a series of documents. And these documents are of very different kind. So, and I try to use the sort of color code here that you will see also later in this presentation. So we have in green here, we have a series of guidelines and tutorials. So remember, this is a sort of bridging the science and the practice. So we have tutorials to put the science into practice and guidelines for how things can be done and models performed. Then we have routines, algorithms, and templates for data and how the data should be used. Then we have actual data and data sets. Then we have a series of models, of spreadsheets, of calculators, and then we have code and notebooks illustrating how the code works. And all is available open access in specific repositories that are divided into the specific tasks that we had in the project. So this is actually where the material is. So on our Align project website, alignproject.eu, we have put a link to each repository. And then we have a file, which is a sort of overview document. And this overview document includes a short description of the purpose of each task performed in the project and the content. And then a list of the files available and a link again back to this repository. This is also available to the European Commission that funds our project and on their internal system. So that's the structure of the overview file that you find in our website. Then when it comes to the repositories, I'm going to go more in detail into that now. There are like 5 or 6 repositories, and these are online on Zenodo. So that's how things are put together. So there is an overview document that tells you where the stuff is and what the stuff is about, and then there is the stuff itself in different places on the internet. So here it's our landing page at the Zenodo repository. This is the address. And as you can see, we have a sort of, you can create a sort of community. That's where our partners and our keywords are. And it's called the Align project, of course. And here we have put all the material. Now let's try to look at one of them. So here again, you see the address, zenodo.org communities aligned /Horizon Europe. I think you'll get this presentation. Otherwise, you can take a screenshot or just check our website. So when you open one of these repositories, for example, this one includes a description of scientific methods. That's the title of our deliverable, and this framework for foreground life cycle inventory of bio-based sectors constrained to biomass availability. We have the developers, and those are the people in the project who reviewed the material. So these deliverables are not peer-reviewed in the sense that we have sent it to an external review, but they are being reviewed internally in multiple rounds and by multiple people within the project. So once you get into one of these repositories, you find the repository, and then you will see a list, a description of what it contains. For example, there is here one of the methods, a method for modeling constraints to biomass availability. There is a description of it. and so on for each of the, and you see there is a list of files, in fact. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So that's what I mean. That's what I meant when I said that a deliverable is a series of documents. Right, so you find your method and there is a description, and then finally there are the files, of course. So you find the file that you want and you can download it or preview it. The nice thing is that you can also see the license we are using, and you have to please follow it. And then you can cite us. So everything has a DOI, and you see a way of citing us down here. So everything is there. You're very welcome to check the material. So I'm going through all of them now and give a short overview of what you will find there. So if we start with the lifecycle inventory part and the background system, what also Marcos will present today. So we have here a guide. So green means a guide, a model description for making the background lifecycle inventory of bio-based sectors. And then we have a tutorial for generating background lifecycle inventories, tier 1. I'll come back on what this means, and you can make these prospective databases in attributional and consequential system model. And then we have the same for tier 2. I'll come back to what that means. And then we have an example. So these are data of the format to be used. So what does it mean that we have a tier 1 and tier 2? All throughout the entire deliverable and all the repositories, we always give recommendations in, let's say, 2 or more tiers of complexity. Why is that? It's because we don't know exactly who is going to use this, and you might be a person who is the first time who does an LCA, and you might be a very experienced LCA user, and we have to address, we have to be able to address both type of people, and that is why we have divided the sort of the tutorials and the methods into different levels of complexity. So if you're a beginner, or if the first time you do this, then use the tier 1, which is the simplest, the basic application of the methods that will give you a result already that you can use. However, there is a trade-off, of course. There might be some simplifications. So if you want a more advanced analysis, then you go on to the tier 2, and then you will require maybe a bit more resources, but then you can get results which are more accurate, or more nuanced, or more, fitting your case, and so on. So we have made this sort of distinction so that based on your resources available and your skills and your knowledge and your interest, then you can apply the methods to the level that you find best suited to your case. Right, when we move to the, we have methods for foreground lifecycle inventory now. We have 3 repositories here. We have one about the constraints to biomass availability. Here there is a method, so a guideline for how to model constraints to biomass availability. We have done a screening of data sources that you can use to calculate what we call a marginal market mix that only includes the suppliers that are not constrained by the capacity to provide new biomass. So here you see how we selected the data. We have also a file where we compare different data sources that you can see why we selected this data and not others. And then we have a tool to do actually this modeling that you can use directly. And then we have the same kind of principles applied also in a code. So the one is made in Excel if you don't know how to code, and the other is in Python and in R. So again, tiers. If your skills are limited, or if you know how to use Excel, then you use this. If you also know how to code, then you can use this one. And of course, you can do other things. You can automate, for example, the analysis. All right. And then we have data sets used for the market mix calculation that is demonstrated in these tutorials. Then we have a data template. This is a guide for structuring and sharing lifecycle inventory data. This is sort of a meta thing. So this is what we will use in all the case studies of the project. So for us, it's important, and you're welcome to use it as well. We have an explainer, also a guide to understand this sort of data template. There are not many common data templates in LCA, so it is important to be able to share data in the same way across people. This is one way you can do it. And then we have a template itself. It's an Excel file. Then we have an example with data of a template. We have also the GLAD metadata template so that you can document your lifecycle inventory data according to the criteria that GLAD, the Global Lifecycle Data Access Initiative, I hope I got the name right, the way they want, so the way the community wants it to be done. And then we have also notebooks for importing the data, so you can test that. And the files for the code for doing that, the software. Then we have methods for foreground lifecycle inventory. Again, this is about modeling dynamic carbon inventories. We have taken an existing model able to simulate the carbon fluxes of forest plantations, and this model was limited to only a couple of species. So we have extended the type of data that you can use so that you can now model a lot of different types of wood products in fact. And we have provided all this data organized into a data set that you can use for the model. So there is the model itself and there is the data, so that you can use the data directly to model the type of biomass you need. And there is a tutorial for using that. And then we have also performed a validation of this, because how do we know this is actually giving good results? And then we have done our best to validate the outcome of this model when using for the new species with actual empirical data from existing studies. And this shows a good match actually. So we are pretty happy about that. And then you can find also this documented. Then we move to the another phase of the life cycle of the LCA, let's say, and we have methods for life cycle impact assessment. Here we have a guide on the life cycle impact assessment for bio-based products, focusing on climate change and biodiversity. Here you find all information about what are the relevant issues regarding different climate change indicators, different biodiversity indicators, biogenic versus non-biogenic, dynamic versus non-dynamic, carbon accounting, and so on. So it's a lot of information here. And then we have a tool for deriving dynamic characterization factors for climate change, and a tutorial for using that. And then we have also a data set based on the most recent published characterization factors for biodiversity. And these were published, but again, they were not in a format that could be imported into software. So we have now used the same data sets and made them available for import into software. So again, trying to bridge what is the most available science with making it available for people to use it. Yes, then there is, we move on to a bit the interpretation. Here we have methods for handling uncertainty. There is a guide on what on the appraisal of uncertainty in the LCA of bio-based products. Here you find definition of uncertainties, classification of uncertainty, and sensitivity types. When you find a description actually of all the most sensitive and uncertainty, most relevant issues regarding uncertainty and sensitivity for each of the other models I just presented. So this is compiled by us to tell you already, look, if you use this model, you have to be careful about this and these things. These parameters are sensitive, results are very sensitive to these parameters, and these things are not included, so you have uncertainty and so on. And then on top of this guide, which is theoretical in a way, then we have a lot of calculators to do to use for doing your uncertainty analysis, and then we have tutorials where you can that you can use. These are based on Python that you can use to actually perform different types of uncertainty and sensitivity analysis techniques on your product system. So basically, these are like worked examples that you can then adapt to your case study directly. And finally, we have methods for socioeconomic assessment. Here we have divided in different guides. We have a guide or a model description for techno-economic assessment for technologies within the bio-based sectors, and a tool for doing that. And then again, we have this in Excel. Then we have a model description for quantification of social indicators and a tool for doing that. And then finally, again, another guide for the multi-criteria decision analysis. This is a tool when you have to sort of decide on the trade-offs between the environmental indicators and the socioeconomic ones, and then a tool for performing that, also in Excel. Yes. What are the next steps now that we have all this material out there? So here you see a list of the case studies that we're going to work on in the next. We have already started this work, but in the next phase of a project, let's say, we're going to apply the tools that we have put together to the case studies and see how they work, basically, and whether they make the assessment of a bio-based products better. You get new insights or not, and so on. So we're going, and also testing a lot of practical issues that will come up. We have already started, so we know there will be things. So we will work with the industrial partners to apply the methods and then testing them of cases and use them for their decision making and to improve their own processes. Finally, I won't go in all details here. Finally, our methods are open. I said it many times, so you're welcome to try them on your case study. And not only that, but we would like to hear from you afterwards. So if you use our methods and you feel inclined to give us a feedback, then you can write to our project mail here, specifying which method you used among the series of ones I just presented. And we would like to hear, any feedback, but was it useful for you? Did it provide any added value? Did you have practical issues? How did you solve them? Don't get me wrong. We are not going to do debugging for you on every kind of possible issue. This is not what I'm trying to say here. I'm saying that the tools are there and you're welcome to use it. If there are problems, you can write to us. Well, look, I didn't use it because there was a problem, and then we will have time to make improvements up to the end of the project. But we don't have time to follow all queries of things that didn't work. And then any other challenges you found in using the method and possible solutions, or anything that you think was not addressed and we should have included, and we should be in the matter of future work, and also share your results if you have any. So we have until the end of the project still to improve and test everything we prepared and make it better, because it's good, I think, but it's not perfect. That's because we are only halfway in the project. What else? No, that was the end of my presentation. Thank you for listening, and I'm very happy to answer your questions. Okay, I see there is one. What about alignment with environmental footprint methods and dataset formats? Yeah, good question. Thank you, Mauro. So let's say we went a bit our own way, but so I don't actually know how much we are aligned with the environmental footprint method and all the ecosystem around that. I think for the most part, for some parts we are probably not aligned, and for many others we will be. We haven't checked that yet, to be honest. So far, our purpose was to take the best available science, we combined it and make it available and operational. And then you can use our tools to make if you want to use our tools to make a environmental footprint compliance study, I think you will be able to do it, but you might have to do some adjustments. So I hope this answers the question. It was not the primary purpose of the project to make a standard or a guideline or a set of tools that fit with a specific type of set guideline, existing guideline or framework. It was only based on finding best available science and make it further develop it or make it operational. So we don't follow necessarily the PEF, the APD system, or whatever. There was a question that was answered already. This is too specific about pulp. Sorry, I will need more time to answer that. Yes, thank you again. From your policy perspective, it will be important to know what is online and what suggestion you will propose for EF methods. Definitely is something we plan to address in the project. How do you in practice use the dynamic characterization factors for global warming potential? Thank you for your question. In practice, you can do it in 2 ways. So we have a sort of tool or an Excel file where you have the characterization factors, and if you know the timing of your emissions, or if you calculate the timing, for example, if you have a forest with our tool, then to each emission, each time step, there is associated a characterization factor for that time step. Now you can decide to use this, one by one and understand how your system works in that way, or the problem is that how to integrate this with some existing LCA software, because LCA software is not geared to deal with this stuff. Sometimes you will need to aggregate them and then obtain one value, which is the aggregated impact over the time horizon, but accounting for the different timing of emissions. So it would be different than using just a standard characterization factor without the differentiation. So you will get a different value there. Yes. Very good question. Thank you. Another one. Yes, this about residues is a very good question. Thank you. So for this, you have to look into our guide on the constraints to biomass, and where we use a very how do you say, a very consequential approach in a way. So if you're based on if you plan to use residues, the suggestion varies to, and you'll find more details there. So I'm just giving you a short answer here, is to look at what is current use of residues, and then what you model is the consequences of increasing the demand for these residues. So if these are now unutilized or unconstrained and being wasted, then you will model with avoided waste, and then otherwise you will likely cascade to new uses of biomass because of the limitations in the availability of this. So I'm giving only short answers here, because there's much more to tell about this stuff. We could stay here hours, and the primary purpose of this presentation is to answer questions about the material, where it is, how it is, so on. But I'm happy to go into also technical details, of course. But I don't know. I don't think we can have a longer conversation on that. What do you think is the useful of prospective LCA for companies? Well, I think there can be many useful things, but especially maybe not all companies need the prospective LCA. But if you're a company who has a very emerging process or technology that is far from being commercialized, and this you expect it to be in the market in 10 years or 15 years from now, we know for sure that these are not unrealistic times for new green technologies in the bio-based sectors. I've been personally speaking with more than 40 developers of these technologies in a previous project, and I know it takes years and years, according to them. So it might be useful for you to try to simulate these technologies as a future point in time and see how we will perform in another type of system that we will have at that time. So that is what I see as the main advantage, actually, right now, and there are also others. Do you have modeling or methods to regionalize characterization factors or country level data set or effect factor? We have for regionalization. So we have been focusing on the for the impact assessment part on the climate change impacts and the biodiversity ones. The climate change, the regionalization is not super important things because the impacts are like global. But the biodiversity one, we used a recent publication from colleagues in NTNU, and where you have regionalized characterization factors. And then there is a tutorial for using them. So on the biodiversity part, yes. On the climate change part, no. Yeah. I don't know, there are some comments. I don't know if it is regarding dynamic characterization factors. Okay, yeah. So you get some answers from our team as well. So I'm just taking the ones that are not answered yet. Did you try to correlate the data with the carbon sequestration and carbon footprint reduction over time? If yes, how much reduction can take place over a year with the application of bio-based products? I don't have an answer to this. It's very product specific. So I cannot answer this, I'm sorry. Thank you for the presentation. Do you have a feeling of how much these methodologies diverge when they will be applied to case-specific applications? I'm not sure what you mean about diverge, but we didn't make it. These are very general. I mean, so you can apply to any case. In fact, I mean, we will apply to specific cases and specific sectors, but they are not designed to be. That would be a bit counterproductive to make a method that you can apply only in one case. So the methods are developed for being applied in all cases. In fact, what we will test is whether this works, in fact, and what are whether this adds actually value, and where do you, because some of these models are a bit more complex than actual LCA practice or current. So we will also try to evaluate whether it makes sense to have more complex models. Do they give you better answers, or can we just live with the simpler ones? And then I don't expect that will be. Of course, the method is general. For example, if you take the model about the carbon accounting for the inventories of forest plantation, there there is a model who can do a series of things, and then you can customize it to your case. So if you want to model spruce or poplar or I don't know, eucalyptus or azobe, this different type of trees, then you will use the data for the different cases. But the structure of a model is the same. Okay. So I hope this answers the question. How different is this approach from the GREET database? I don't know. Because the GREET database is a database, whereas here we don't have databases as such. Does the project plan to comply with the standard in the future? No. You can use our results to make your studies that comply to the standards. You can use our tools to make your study that comply to whatever standard you want. It's not the objective of a project to make a standard or to necessarily be compliant with the standard. We only provide tools, methods, recommendations for making the best LCA we think you can make from the science perspective. Then if you need to follow a specific guideline or whatever, that is outside our control. But you can use our tools to make studies that comply with one or the other. So to answer the question, we don't have to comply and we don't need to. And it's not the objective of doing that. LCA studies have to comply to some standards. This for sure. I don't know, Marisa, can you help me? I lost track of the time. How much time we have for more questions?
I think you have 15 minutes, but if
15 minutes.
Yeah.
Luxury. If there are no more questions, we'll go on with Marcos' presentation. Okay, there is another question about standards. To follow PAF, we should follow a specific method. Yes, you should follow. To follow PAF, you have to follow the PAF recommendations. Okay, the PAF recommendations are a lot. So, but if you make a study, an LCA study of a bio-based product, you want to make it PEF compliant, you will have to follow the rules of PEF, but still you still have to make an inventory, still you have to make an impact assessment and to use some characterization factors. And then still you need to make a certain analysis, and then you can use our tools to do that. Then if there is a specific requirement, I don't remember once from PEF now, for example, biogenic carbon has to account for 1 or 0 or whatever it is, then if you want to be PEF compliant, you follow PEF. If you want to do the analysis according to our recommendations, which are based on what we think is the best approach scientifically, then you do that. It's not, we are not having, it's not, we're not prescriptive in this project. It's beyond the scope of a project to be that. Because it's impossible. Think about it. We cannot comply with those standards. Whatever we do, standards are not agreeing with them. So whatever choice we make, we will make it wrong. So from our perspective, we can only provide you the tools to do the analysis as scientifically as possible. And then if you have to follow the decision of a specific standard made based on other criteria than that, you have to just follow that. Use our tools to the extent that you can, to the extent that you can use them. Are the tools and inventories you produce try to be as compatible as possible with the respective LCA software? Yes. In fact, yes, we try to be as compatible as possible with the softwares that we are using here in the project, which are mainly the Sigma Pro software and the Brightway 2 software. So we have the tutorials and the importers and the data files and formats that we have used are fit for use in these two types of software. One of them is an open source software and the other one is not. So at least we had to choose. We wanted to have an open source one because it's based on our open science approach. And also that's what the commission correctly, I think, requires. So we have provided we are trying to provide the tools so that they can fit these two frameworks, which are different. Then there is also other software, LCA software out there. Is not because we think is less good or anything. It's just this is what we could make with the resources available and our capacity as well. EcoSpold, yes, but EcoSpold is not a format that you can use for practical purposes of preparing your inventory and importing it into software. So EcoSpold is a very good format for data documentation, and once you have the data in your software, you can then convert it into EcoSpold if you want.
Good. I think we can slowly make an end to this question and feedback session. You can continue to ask questions. We will try to moderate and give answers via the chat. Thank you very much, Massimo, for this presentation. I hope that it's clear where everything can be found. And yeah, as you can see, we try in the project to bring you all along and to make it easy to use the methods and to give the feedback. We will show that also in the next presentation done by Marcos Watanabe. Marcos, I would say you can take it away and take the screen.
Sure, I will. Okay. Hope you can see my main screen.
Yes, we can see it.
Okay, great. So, first of all, thanks for the opportunity of presenting and such a nice workshop organized by BTG. Thanks, Patrick, Marisa, Massimo, for the nice presentation. So I'm Marcos. I am researcher here at INDEQUAL, the Industrial Ecology Program at NTNU. And we are part of the, we are like in Trondheim in Norway right now, for those on who never been at NTNU. So today I'll give you a quick overview on the Prospective background database systems, some main and basic concepts, definitions, and of course we'll talk a little bit about the main challenges we had in the project Align when generating prospective background databases. And also during the slides, as Marisa told before, we will have a couple of questions so that we can make a more interactive presentation and understand better your profile and topics of interest. All right. Okay. So moving to the next slide. It's frozen. Can you see my next slide?
No, we still see the first one.
Okay.
I think now it's, yeah.
Now it's moving. All right. So starting from the very basics. So what is a background system, right? So as you know, when we perform environmental assessments of any product, we have basically two main systems to be understood, right? The first one is the production process itself. That can be called a foreground system. It could be, for example, biofuel plant. It could be an industrial facility producing biochemicals or biomaterials, for instance. So for the foreground system on the right, we need to account, of course, for all the local emissions to the air, soil, water, and of course, understand what are the main inputs from the technosphere, as technically we call it. So, so these inputs from the technosphere are actually the interface of the foreground system with the background. And the background is the system on the left. So, as you know, this system refers to all the direct and indirect suppliers of goods, services, and everything belonging to the whole supply chain. So in LCA, then it is really important to account for all of these impacts. For example, it can be biomass feedstock, production, transportation, understand which fuels, machinery, as you can see in the figure, packaging, what else is involved, direct or indirectly in the process. So, for example, electricity is used at some point, or chemicals, then it's very important to understand where they come from. For example, in the case of electricity, which are the power generation sources, which can be extremely relevant because all of them will be included in the final result of our product, correct? So in summary, a background system is of utmost and extreme relevance for NLCA because especially in the bio-based sector, I think we can say that much of the impact happen on the background because, for example, take the example of greenhouse gas emissions and the CO2 that is actually biogenic. So most of the fossil emissions would actually happen in the upstream activities. But as you know, because we have so many activities and processes, actually we can say that we have infinite processes in the background. And usually we use matrices to represent these infinite processes and convert to a single score. We need to use databases, right? So most of us, we end up using commercial background inventory database like EcoInvent, where you can find predefined background inventories for all of this process in the upstream activities when you perform LCAs. So, but the point is that, as you might know, the compilation of life cycle inventories is one of the most challenging stages of any life cycle assessment because we require lots of data, like inputs from the technosphere and all the emissions to the compartments of biosphere, like air, water, and soil. But as we know, a classic life cycle assessment considers on the foreground system a static technology. And what does it mean? We basically have no improvements in the way we produce things. So we don't consider that. So some studies, of course, they can include one or more future scenarios. For example, they can assume better efficiencies or performances in the production process, lower emissions, but usually these foreground inventories and all the storyline lack a more detailed description of at which point in time such improved scenario will be deployed in the real world. The same happens for the background database. So the situation is really similar. So on the left, you can see that most of the database we know have a list of predefined data sets. They are very specific to a point in time. And they, as you know, represent the average technology available in the market. So whenever there are updates or new versions of such data sets, when they're released, they still refer to technologies that are available today, right? So from these two observations related to foreground and background databases, we come up with two main obvious conclusions. First, we face, like, from the environmental policy aspect, we have like targets and goals that are projected for the long term, consider many, time steps. So it's obvious that the temporal dimension now holds key importance. If you, for example, take the Green Deal targets for greenhouse gas intensities for biofuels, for example, we have a very dynamic aspect because they project different targets for 2030, 2040, 2050, and so on. So also many other sectors are actually pursuing carbon neutrality, and they refer to goals that can be set to 2030 or 2050. So this is one thing. And the second point is that we have a challenge related to the consistency of the analysis, because even though you consider a future scenario for your foreground system, but you keep using a static background database, then we would have like a temporal mismatch, and the results that we generate can be considered inconsistent if we don't specify the point in time we're talking about, correct? So with that in mind, first, we need to comprehend how inventory, like the traditional inventory databases, they are structured, because then we can talk about the prospective view of such databases. So as I said before, background database consists of collection of data sets, correct, which can have a good coverage of the main sectors and industries in our economy. Take the examples of electricity, transport, fuels, and so on. So we have this nice coverage of sectors, especially in this commercial and licensed databases. So for each one of these sectors,
okay. Yeah, just
hello, I think there's someone. I hear someone, but okay, I will keep going. Yeah, so each one of the sectors, for example, here I just randomly selected metal production, but could be whatever. We have many life cycle inventory data sets. So we have all these nice descriptions of technologies, inputs, emissions from each activity. And as you might know, all of these data sets, they are organized into regions, so correct? So we have, for example, each activity can be related to a country or a specific state inside a country, depending on the database you use. So the locations are really important, because databases like EcoInvent, we have some sectors and grouped sectors and industries that can be grouped into markets, correct? And since these markets are description of these regions and macro regions, we need to have this coherent logic behind the background databases, because in the end, our databases will need to consider as much as possible the real world in terms of production volumes, technological mixes that are considered, and the compilation of data sets need to embed this logic of a global supply chain or a global market, correct? So once we understand this concept, we can jump to the definition of prospective lifecycle assessment. First of all, it's hard to define what prospective lifecycle assessment is. There are a bunch of definitions and terms popping up over the last few years. But the point of view of executing or performing lifecycle assessment, we can say that it means that we have projections for both the foreground and background inventories throughout the time, in such a way that we can represent evolutions and represent the changes that we're observing technologies and both in the at your foreground system and in your background as well. So in this case of perspective, we can have at least two possibilities here. Here on the top, we can say that, for example, you can have a technology that's fully mature. So your problem would be mostly having nice descriptions about your background database. So we can say that in this case, we would kind of having a static foreground inventory, maybe project some improving efficiency, but mostly changing how the background is structured. And this can be represented for the upcoming decades, 2030, 2040, and so on. Depends a lot on the scope of the study. But the second case is when we have these LCA studies that are related to products with lower TRL or technology readiness levels. So in this case, we need to consider the full development of technologies and the time that it might require to do so. So it's important to have, in this case, data to have projections on for how the foreground systems will behave. And in this context, we have methods for upscaling them, and they are still being built, and some of them are in the literature, and we can follow some of the applications that has already been published. For example, I bring this example of emerging bio-based technologies. So as you know, like it's obvious, like in the bio-based sector, we know that that's exactly the case, dealing with low TRL. So we can have like biomaterials, biochemicals, any other bioproducts that can be considering emerging technologies. So they didn't reach a full maturity yet. So in our group at NTNU, this is one of the topics of research actually. And here I show this publication led by Narie de Souza. I think she's in the audience participating. She's also part of the project Align. So in this case, she shows how to perform an LCA of biopolymer using a prospective LCA approach, and she deals with scaling up of the both foreground data and integrate these projections with future background databases. Is a very nice study. But as you can see on the right side of the screen, after projecting this full maturity for the foreground system and considering, of course, the evolution in the background system, the results is like the environmental impacts can be hugely decreased by the effects of scaling up and changing in the technologies of the background. So if you want more details on these numbers and if you want a nice example how to perform this and the approaches considered, you can go to these publications. You can check it out online, all right? And I think at this point of the presentation, we'd like to have the first interactive poll. I would like to try to understand a little bit more about the profile of our audience and the level of expertise or familiarity on the topic. So I think Marisa will probably share this poll, correct? I cannot see the...
Yeah, it just popped up for everyone.
Okay, all right. So probably, Marisa, I'll need your help to
No
to
problem.
tell me what the result was. So please, you can choose one of the three following alternatives. So what is your current level of knowledge on a prospective LCA? So first option is like for those ones who are not experienced at all. Second one, for those one who understand the concept but never worked with that. And the third one is for people that are actually into the topic, both working with methods, applications, tools, whatever. So I'll give you a couple of seconds and maybe Marisa can tell me what the result was.
So about 40% of people are currently working with PLCAs, and another 40% understand the concept but have never worked with them, and only 20% have. This is the first time they've heard of it, so that is good to hear.
Yeah. Yes, that's a very mixed audience. It's really cool. Thank you, Marisa, for the feedback.
No problem.
Yeah, so we can see that the majority of people trying to understand a little bit more the concept, which is nice because actually that's the intention of this presentation. Is quite basic for those who are interested in having your first experiences with the topic. So yeah, okay, that's great. So let's move on to the next slide. So okay, so once we understand how to more or less to carry out a prospective lifecycle assessment, we can start understanding why we perform and actually why it's so challenging to perform this type of studies. So you can imagine like a background databases with thousands of of life cycle data sets. Like take EcoInvent as an example, it has, I don't know, more than about 20,000 activities or description of different processes. So the first thing is like from the point of view of generating these data sets, you're dealing with lots of data. It's really time consuming, data intensive. And even though you think about adapting and changing the current databases, you need also to add new inventories, correct? Because some future scenarios will use technologies that are not currently being used. So how to represent that? You need to bring new technologies like carbon capture storage, hydrogen production, I don't know, batteries, whatever will be used in this transition to more green economy. It's not already in there in the current commercial database. So we're talking about very data intensive challenge. The second challenge is related to the geographical locations. So as I said, each activity has a location. So if you want to project inventories for the future, you need to be consistent, right? You need to consider the aptitude of each region or each location, for example. So the projections need to consider somehow like the resource availability, even in investment capacity of different regions and countries. They need to be taken into account. So all these factors should actually shape also these projections, correct? So that we can have a consistent database creation. So this is the second challenge. And I think the last one would be related to the market structure, which is kind of very, very correlated to the second aspect. So we are somehow we need to project these databases, but because we have these different market structures in the inventory databases, we need to consider that, like the selection of technologies, the proportions they have in the market, like all this aspect of technology penetration in the future, and also the production volumes. All of this needs to make some sense, correct? And more than that, they need to make sense at like smaller and bigger scale or larger scales, like can be either regions or at a global level, correct? So because of these three aspects, we can understand that this is not obvious thing to work with, okay? So that's why lately we have lots of studies in the literature covering this possibility of integrating these future inventories to integrated assessment modules, or IMs here. And with this background, let's say, we can say that lots of evolution have been observed in the past few years. Here I list some of the publications that are really important to the field, but I might have missed others. So I apologize for that. So, but the thing is that this framework has been evolving a lot over the last decade, and with the contributions of many important authors in the field. So basically, we need to understand what an IM is. So these integrated assessment models are let's say, models that try to simplify how the world works from the utilitarian perspective, let's say. So we can understand them as like these models that represent this complex physical, social systems, and we have these representations of different compartments like economy, environment, society, climate, and all of them are interconnected in such a way that depending on the way we change their parameters, like gross domestic product or population increase or maybe carbon prices, whatever, we can lead to a different outcome on the right side, okay? So we can, for example, observe different technology use or penetration in different markets. We can have different impacts on climate change or maybe impacts on land use or other environmental impacts of interest, correct? So this framework is perfect to be in line with the modeling of prospective databases. So of course, there's lots of IMs being developed by several research institutions, and which one of them have their own modeling framework, assumptions, and all of these models, they are actually open to consider different trajectories that can be optimistic or more pessimistic, depends on the storyline you believe in, or that it will be more related to the future as you see it. So in Aligned, we don't reinvent the wheel. So after, like, of course, lots of research and literature review, we end up using Premise, which is this tool or software, let's call it like this, that integrates these outputs from the integrated assessment models, and this software actually make these transformations on the data sets and then implement these transformations in EcoInvent. So we can generate future background databases that are compatible with different softwares for LCA, like CIMA-Pro and Brightway right now. And yeah, so we can have, we can generate different background databases considering both sequential or attributional approaches, several time steps from, I think, from 2005 to to the year 2100. So there are many options to be considered. So first of all, we'd like to thank all the developers of Premise because it's a very useful tool for us. And we also had a nice interaction with people, with the developers, actually. So as we can see, this tool is really useful. It can generate these consistent databases for addressing all the challenges I showed in the previous slides. And during the course of the project Aligned, we had the opportunity of interacting closer to the developers. Special thanks to Romain Saki, that is in the audience. I saw you, and we also interact a lot with Ben Mais, and because we have many partners in Aligned project interested in performing consequential LCAs. So they have just released, actually it was last year, they released this new version of Premise that enables us to model consequential background databases. So I would like to thank again for the nice interaction and helping us with the bugs and for all the developments involved. Of course, I forgot names of other developers here. I apologize, but just like to say that Aligned does not develop any tool. We just use the best ones that are available, and whenever possible, we interact and contribute to try to improve them. So I think now it's time to have more interaction with the audience. So at this time, we'll have 2 questions in a row. So the first question is important for us because it will help to have an idea about how many of you are familiar with this tool. So please let us know if you have ever used Premise. So you can select just one of the 3. And again, I'll ask Marisa to help me reading the results.
By now, 90 people have responded, and about half of them have never heard of Premise before. 30% have heard about it before but never used it, and 17% have used Premise before.
All right.
Yeah. Okay,
so we see that not many people have used, or at least from our audience. So this is actually nice. So now maybe with this presentation, we can disclose more about this tool that can help you to perform prospective life cycle assessment. That's the intention of this presentation as well. And the second one is which software do you actually use when you perform your LCAs? And this question is of course because if you want to implement this tool, you need to use both SimmaPro and Brightway too. Correct me if I'm wrong, Romain, but so if you use different software, I think that's right now the output databases are not be compatible with softwares rather than SimmaPro and Brightway. So Marisa, can you please help me?
A quick note to the audience: if you want to submit your answer, you first have to go to the second page, but you don't have to fill in anything for the optional second question. So by now, 80 people have responded, and about half of them are mostly using SimmaPro. Quite some people are also using OpenLCA, Brightway. Then 3% is using Gabi. 10% is not performing any LCAs, and a couple of people are also using other types of software. So in the second box, I see databases such as EcoInvents, Activity Browser, and then also a couple of options from the first page. Also,
Right.
people working directly, multiple.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Yeah.
All right. Okay. So most of the audience is using CIMAPRO right now.
Yes.
Some of them using Brightway and Activity Browser that operates with the same language. That's cool. And others, so working with Gabi and OpenCA. All right. So we can move on. So now that we understand better, a little bit better the audience, we can go to the next slide. So in this one, I'll try to not spend too much time. If you want more information about which transformation functions are performed by premise, you can go to the main website that are here at the bottom of the slide. So, but I can just try to summarize what actually happens inside this nice tool. Basically, in all of these sectors that are being presented here on the screen, we have these progressive improvements in the technology. So we can have either improvements in efficiencies or maybe scaling up, scaling down emissions throughout time, insertion or addition of new inventory data sets to represent promising technologies that can be brought into these different industries. And as far as I know, there is also transformation functions in the very last version of premise on the biomass market. And I think for that one, it's mostly purpose-grown biomass and some, I think, forest residues markets that are being built to actually to be connected more to the power generation or energy-based sectors. So right now, like they're focusing on this biomass connection, biomass market transformations to these to energy production. And in terms of possibilities of scenarios, if you want to use the tool as we want in Project Align, so this is just a brief summary of what we found when exploring the tool. So as you can see, we have two different integrated assessment models. Remind on the top, which is developed by PIC in Germany, and at the bottom we can see Image, which is another IM developed by PBL in Netherlands. Both of them are really nice and very well known integrated assessment models, but of course they differ in terms of structure, assumptions, correct? For example, the number of world regions, how world is divided into. So we have 26 regions for image and 12 for remind. And of course, there are many other differences in terms of assumptions, especially regarding technology penetration and other drivers that can shape the outputs from IMs. And as you can see, we can also have very nice possibilities of exploring different shared socio-economic pathways or SSPs. So we have currently SSP2, which would stand for, we can understand as a business as usual kind of storyline for the world. We also have SSP1, which is a little bit more optimistic because it considers like more use of renewables and more like the predominance of more sustainable decisions, let's say, at the world level, and SSP5, which considers that the world will follow a more like fossil fuel driven pattern. So all of the SSPs can be also connected as if we look to the right hand side of the slide to these different climate policy scenarios. So we can have, for example, more pessimistic assumptions, for example, as the baseline or base, where no environmental policy will be implemented, but we also can have gradually we can progress to more optimistic storylines until when we end up with the last one, which is peak budget 500, where more optimistic assumptions are made in terms of climate change. So the temperature increase by 2100 is not that high. So as you can see, considering all these combinations of IAMs, SSPs, and policy scenarios, we have, well, more or less 20 different scenarios to be explored when we generate background databases. And of course, more than that, more than 20 different scenarios, we can generate them for different time steps, correct? So we have lots of combinations and possibilities. So considering that somehow knowing the concept of integrated assessment models are important, and because it affects the way background databases will be built, I would invite you to answer this poll to have this feeling on your knowledge on IAMs currently. So the first option is for those one who never heard about them. The second one is kind of, you know what it is, but your work never depended on the use of IAMs somehow. And the third one, it's like if you are currently using using IAMs or working with development of IAMs and so on. So give you a couple of seconds so Marisa can help me to account.
Yes. So a little under half of the participants today have never, or this is the first time they've heard about them. So a little over 40%. Then about 1/3 of the people here have heard about them before, but their work does not depend on it. And then 20% of the people here today are somehow dependent on the use of the models.
Right.
Yep.
It's very mixed. Yeah, thank you.
Okay.
So it's nice to hear that some people actually are into the topic. And it's important just to highlight that you don't need to be a specialist on integrated assessment models if you want to use a premise or other tools that try to couple them like databases and the outputs of IAMs, but you need to know more or less which type of scenario you're selecting and try to align them to the storyline that you have in your own research, right? So that's why if you're more interested, you could like Google it and try to find scientific publications on at least to get to know this models or remind an image. And another comment that I didn't make is that actually, as far as I know, premise is open to other integrated assessment models, but then I think that would require like either more coding or if you want to contact the developers. But there is this possibility and on the structure of the tool. So now I'll bring some example of applications because I think we were too much into theory. So as I said here in our group and at NTNU, we have worked with not only with premise, but also with the Prospective LCA's approach. And we have published in some different journals. So for example, I bring this publication where we made this prospective life cycle assessment of drop-in biofuels. So it's kind of bio-based related. And this one is for a Norwegian case study. So we found out that, of course, depending on the climate policy stringency that you consider, actually the impacts of only improving the background database can be really high. So for this specific biofuel conversion technology, we could observe at least up to 50% reduction in the greenhouse gas intensity, which means grams of CO2 equivalents per megajoule of fuel, only because of changes in the background. So if we use like more conservative scenarios, then these improvements could reach more than 30% by the year 2050. So it shows like how some sectors or some applications can be really sensitive to these improvements. And in this particular publications, we also made some adaptations in our electricity grid, because as you know, the current tools work with macro regions. So actually what we did was to use our own projections for the Norwegian electricity mix. So we had our own projections for how the sector would be decarbonized for 2030 and 2040 and 2050 and so on. So we kind of mix lots of tools and approaches to try to try to adapt them to answer our research questions. And I think more recently, we've published an article with dealing with the prospective assessment also, but for the European cement industry. So although this is not exactly bio-based industry, we consider for the cement industry lots of combined measures like increase thermal efficiency of plants, decrease electricity use in cement plants, and sometimes increase the use of alternative fuels like biomass is one of them, and also implementation of other more advanced technologies that could be observed in Europe in the future. So in this case, of course, we have used the premise, and also we had from the project that we're part of data to compile the foreground inventories, correct? So we could explore these trade-offs between climate change and also other relevant impact categories. As we can see here, water depletion, fossil fuel use, human health. So we can see that actually the prospective assessment can lead to very impactful messages that can affect also policy making, and we can try to contribute for deeper changes at larger scales. In this case, Europe, correct? But in Aligned, we have sort of different challenges because, you know, prospective background modeling involves using tools, as I said, to generate database. But we can say that during this the project, we have at least 4 challenges, let's say, that we faced, and they are not exactly technical. Because the first aspect that we noticed that we had this issue of awareness. So even though lots of information is out there on the internet, on GitHub, everywhere, many LCA practitioners, they are not still familiar with the topic of prospective lifecycle assessment and how to use the information that is currently available on the internet, right? And the second aspect that we saw is related to skills. So some people working with LCAs have little, or maybe they don't have any experience at all with working with any programming languages. So sometimes using information on GitHub or running codes that are already available, for example, on the web pages, it can be a hard task for many people. And as we saw in the polls, some people never used Premise, or some of them don't have any experiences with programming languages, I think. So this is one of the most challenging part, how to implement that in the project. The third challenge was related to compatibility, correct? Because in many occasions, we observed that because we had software updates or sometimes bugs, some people in the project had difficulties to use it. So although the developers and the community, they are really nice and helpful solving this kind of bugs that I myself had many, and all the time I have them solved by on the webpage on GitHub, for example. We in the project Align, we had to choose a stable version that could be used by all partners, and they need to be compatible in all machines. So related to that, we have this last challenge in the project, which is having this challenge of reproducibility, because we will have several case studies and we need to generate comparable databases. And considering that EcoInvent is always evolving and improving, and also Prem is always evolving and improving, we need to define a cutoff and where we could assume a common framework or background for generating the databases. So before proceeding, I would like to know from the audience if how many of you are actually familiar with the programming languages? And here I was specific to Python and Jupyter notebooks, because as you know, here, at least here at NTNU, and I know that other universities that are partners, like Aalborg, for example, they're using more and more Brightway 2 premise, and it is somehow will demand from LCA practitioners to have some knowledge in Python. And I would like to hear from you if you have either advanced skills in Python, if you only can, program the basics, or if you have never used it, it's okay as well, because
Okay.
yeah.
Only a small crowd today have advanced skills in Python. 12% of the people here. The majority, so just over half of the people here have never used it, and 36% know the basics.
Yeah. So it correlates a lot with the experience we had lately, not in Project Align, but also at NTNU and the projects we develop here. This is a very new topic, although the research dates back from more than 10 years ago. These tools have been released quite recently, and not all of the people are aware the existence of these tools and not even how to use it. So having knowledge in Python language can be something that can be, would say, an additional challenge, but don't have to be, because actually that's why we develop tutorials in the Align project. So the idea of developing tutorials in Aligned is like that we knew that of the difficulties and challenges of people trying to implement their analysis. So as Massimo pointed out, this is not only for the background database. We have tutorials for almost all the steps involved in the lifecycle assessments, from compilation of foreground inventories, sometimes for characterization factors, how to account carbon dynamically, and so on. But for the case of background system, it was not different. So we had to have in mind that we needed to develop something that could be very user-friendly. And by user-friendly, I say that we need like step-by-step for people with less skills, I'd say. We had to think about these different levels of practitioners. So, and the second reason of performing or preparing these tutorials is to consider that we need in the project these common databases for the background database generation, so that we could also avoid some compatibility issues, or maybe if you wanted to compare results from different case studies, we could say, okay, we use the same version of the software, we use the same version of the commercial inventory database, and so on. So in the project Align, what has been done so far is first we try to understand the state of the art in the literature, review of Prospective LCA. So we summarized the theory behind it, and mostly we focused on the tool premise. What are its potentials, and what are the limitations, as I said, and then we moved to a next step, which was the testing. So here I'd like to also thank all partners that helped us to develop these tutorials. People from NTNU, Aalborg University, INSA Toulouse in France, University in Antwerp, and of course the developers. Thank you again for helping us, especially with the release of a premise with the consequential, enabling the generation of consequential databases. And so far we tested version 2.01. I think there are more recent. This is not the latest one, but it was the most updated one that we could use and test internally, which is compatible with EquiInvent 3.9, the case of consequential analysis, and I think 3.91 if you want to perform a conventional attributional approach. So we tested the tutorials that basically focus on the generation of this, but there are also other steps that we implement in the tutorials. So, for example, we need to guide the users on the step-by-step procedures on how to use Anaconda prompt, where to open it, the command lines, how to install the basic softwares to then move to the installation and of premise and to run the codes. We also prepared tutorials to set up projects and load a common Python environment that could be used to install in generated databases. And for some cases, we also try to implement a tutorial for speeding up the connection of both foreground and background inventories in Brightway 2. So as Massimo said, we try to divide the tutorials in different levels, starting from tier 1, which is basically for those users who are just want to explore the tool, don't have maybe they don't want to perform in any Prospective LCA right now, but they just want to use it. So this tier 1 is like generate one single database. So what we see is that some users that are currently starting to use this tool, they don't even know which scenario to select, and it's hard because it although it like the tutorials you can find even in premise web pages, they are very easy to understand, having the background on, okay, what I do now, which type of IAM I select, which type of SSP and policy scenario, what I do now. So like in order to have like this very detailed and comprehensive user-friendly tutorial, we select one scenario. We started by using Remind. I have nothing against image, which is really nice as well, but the Remind under the current structure of the tool has a more options of climate policy scenarios to be connected with. So we just randomly selected here Remind. And then for SSP2, we prefer to be kind of conservative, let's say. It's like balanced way of seeing the future. So as I said, you can understand this storyline. If you want to Google it, you can read more about it, but it's basically not even optimistic or pessimistic. We can understand that some progress will be observed, but basically not nothing disruptive in terms of future. And for the environmental policy or climate policy, we chose the NDC or nationally determined contributions. As you know, like it would be the situation where countries would try to comply the target set in Paris Agreement, and we understand that it could be interesting if you want to, for example, model databases that are in line with the target set at continental scale. For example, this Green Deal policy at European Union and European Commission that are trying to promote for different sectors climate neutrality by 2050. So for these reasons, we chose the year 2050, but you could also choose 2030 or whatever target that you could understand as more useful for you. And I think the trade-off of tier one is that we just generate one database, and we cannot have this nice coverage that premise allows us to do. But anyway, we see that this can be the fastest way to use the tool if you want just to generate one database and see how it goes. The tier two is like the full use of premise as it is. So we could generate in this level multiple databases. So in the tutorial, there is a pre-selection of IAMs and SSPs, but here's just for you to know, you could choose either Remind or Image. And this is like quite similar to the steps that we can see in tier one, but the difference is that you, in just one single run of the code, you can generate multiple databases. You can generate 5, 10 databases, 20, you choose. And you can also select the SSP policy scenario in the year and several time steps if you want to, for example, understand which background database would have. If you have a bio-based product that is like at low TRL now and you would be released in 2030, for example, then you could select 2030 as a starting time step and then move like from, I don't know, 5 to 5 years, 2035 and so on, and align it to your own research questions. So the nice thing is like, okay, you can fully use the full experience of premise, but on the other hand, there's a trade-off. You end up with lots of databases, and having lots of background databases, and you at some point you need to connect them with your foreground databases, and then you can do it manually, Pro or even Activity Browser. But if you have a bunch of them, it can be really annoying and time consuming. So for this, thinking about this, we also provide a tutorial on how to speed up in linking this foreground and background databases. But this would require using Jupyter Notebook and Brightway too. As far as I know, most of you are using mostly Pro, as we could see on the polls. But anyway, it's not that hard if you want to use. So yeah, so if you can use this approach and try to speed up this connection using this tier 2 tutorial. And tier 3 is actually not a tutorial, but it opens the field of exploring prospective life cycle assessment and also premise, because if you go deeper, actually there are a possibility of generating user-defined scenarios. So, and this can be useful, for example, if you understand that there is a sector or industry in your lifecycle assessment that is not actually being fully covered by premise. Can be, for example, chemical, that is not being directly transformed by the functions in the software. And then you would have the possibility of inserting your own projections for your own sector, your own background sectors. But this would be time consuming. So you would need data and projections that should be consistent with IM-based projections. So considering the time length of aligned project, we consider this solution could be kind of risky considering we have project deadlines. But for those ones who are interested in taking a look at this add-on or feature of Premise, I strongly recommend you because it's really nice. I think you can see on their webpage some examples of particular industries and products that or activities that are being added to the post version of Premise. And the second option is somewhat or somehow related to what we already have done at NTNU in some papers that we've published. That at some cases we need to increase the geographical resolution of inventories because, as you know, Premise can provide nice projections for macro regions. And if you have a region or a country that differs too much or differs a lot, which is like, for example, the case of the Norwegian electricity grid, which is very clean and very hydropower based. And in the future, it will be like very wind power based. And if you take it, the European, the projection for Europe, for example, then you can have like something to be improved. So this can be a little bit less time consuming if you want to know more about on how we did that. You can click on the link here for the tier 3.2. So I think this is the last slides. We are approaching to the end. So I would like to ask you two questions. They're the final poll. So given your needs, time constraints, which would be the tutorial that could be more suitable for you? So here you can choose multiple. You can select multiple options, either tier 1, which is that one which would generate only single databases, or maybe if you're more trying to understand all the uncertainties involved in the multiple possibilities for background scenario, you can go to tier 2. And for a more case-specific database would be tier 3. And the last option, if you're not planning to perform any PLCs, is also okay as well.
So we'll have to go through this a bit quickly, as it's almost 12 o'clock. So for the results, most people, so 40% have chosen option 2, tier 2, the multiple databases. And then for tier 1 and tier 3, it's both about 20% of people. And then 14% of people are not planning to perform any prospective LCAs.
Right.
So I think
it's good. Yeah. And we can move to the next one. We will not have time to read all of them, right, Marisa? So besides the tutorials, if you have any comment on how to maybe improve these tools, you can leave your comment here in the open text box. Would be glad to read them, all of them, after the workshop. And going to the final remarks, just as a wrap up. So we saw that the importance of generating consistent background databases and how to do that, and how this can be extremely important for bio-based sector and which deals with low TRL technologies. We also talked about the current tools available that Align does not intend to reinvent the wheel, but use the best ones that are available, and how we can mitigate some challenges with development of tutorials. And as a last comment, if you're interested in using tutorials and if you're curious to see how we made all of them, just go on the webpage as disclosed by Massimo and Patrick, and just seek for these tutorials for background databases. Okay, I apologize for being a little bit late, but I would like to thank you very much for your attention. And if you have any questions or comments, I would be glad to take after, not now, but I'll read maybe the chat and try to have a feeling on the questions you had. So maybe I'll stop sharing right now.
We have been trying to answer most of the questions, Marcus. So
thank you very much. Yeah.
Thank you again for the presentation.
Yeah. Thanks, Massimo and all. Okay. So
I don't know, Patrick, do you have any concluding remarks?
I have a few last points. It's not huge. I think, first of all, we can say thank you, Marcus. This was quite interesting. It's very nice to know, actually, that a lot of people here are interested to know about prospective LCA, and many know already a lot about it. I also would like to thank all the people who put their questions in the chat and put their tips and links in the chat. Thank you very much. I think you helped all of us. We will send the slides of the meetings to of this meeting to all the signups, and in time we have a recording of our workshop, which will be there, and we will have a third methodology workshop with results, hopefully in the latter part of 2024. And of course, latter part is a bit general because we would like to have also the results there presentable, well-rounded, so that we can we're not too soon on that. Lastly, I would like you to invite you to the stakeholder network. The stakeholder network is a group of people that is interested in the Align project. You get, for the things that you are interested in, you can put that in your sign up. In your sign up, you get, when we have something new to tell, you get information. So we're not spamming you, but we would like to target it to those people that are interested and give only the interested information there. So lastly, I would like to thank all of you. I thought we were maybe a little bit earlier, but we're all in all relatively nicely on time. Thank you, Massimo, for your presentation. Thank you, Marcus, for your presentation. And Marissa, thank you for doing all the useful things in our machine room. Thank you all. I hope you had an interesting workshop and have a very good day and a very good weekend. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Patrick, I would like to mention, because I checked the slide, that we forgot to put the name of one of our partners, which is A4F, in the very first slide, and they are microalgae company from Portugal. So
yes,
I just wanted to mention that is totally my mistake on our side. So they are also involved in the project because we have also this technology included. It was in the list of case studies.
Okay.
So I thought it was good to mention. Thank you, everybody, and it was a pleasure. And I hope you will find our material useful, and if not, write to us. Goodbye.